Okay, we're now live on Facebook. So welcome everyone who's just jumped on the Zoom call, and happy days, because I thought I was just going to get one Land Rover instructor, but instead I've got a whole collection of them. I'm not sure what the collective term for a lot of Land Rover instructors is. Maybe it's a handsomeness or something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but whatever it is, then here we are. So, okay, so what do we know about the new Defender? Unlike the previous one, it's got fully independent suspension and it's air suspension, so very similar to all the other modern Land Rovers. There's an 8-speed automatic only, no manual this time round. It's got a petrol, diesel, and there will be coming a hybrid or PHEV, plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. There's a long wheelbase and short wheelbase option at the moment. That's called a 90 and 110, and a 130 is strongly rumoured but not confirmed. We'll talk a bit more about that later on. It has terrain response too. We'll go into that in more detail later on. And in a first for Land Rover, it is actually configurable. Again, more detail later. The spare is on the rear door. It's on what's called the D7X platform, the X standing for extreme. And it's a 5+2, so it can seat 7, but it's really characterised as a 5+2, which means that the 2 people in the back are not quite as comfortable as they would be in, say, a Discovery. However, there is a jump seat option, so you can have 3 people sitting abreast up front, and the battery is under the right front seat, true Defender style, and it's got something called SOTA, which is software over the air, and there's 14 ECUs, and I can imagine a few people are twitching right now about that, which can be updated over the air. So you're just driving along and the car can diagnose itself and update itself. And there's side pod storage, we'll talk about that later on as well. Payload is up to 900 kilograms. Ground clearance up to 291 millimeters. Wading depth is 900 millimeters, and that's with the air suspension. There's 32-inch tyres, so it's significantly taller tyres than on other modern Land Rovers like Discovery or Range Rover. Minimum rim side is 18 or 19-inch, depending on the engine. The recovery points are rated at 6.5 tonnes. The fuel tank's 85 to 90 litres for the 110, depending on the engine. Tare weight's about 2,300. We'll talk a bit about towing later on. It has the cross-axle rear locker, the EDIF at the back. And a new thing for terrain response is wade mode. There's also clear sight rear view, clear sight ground view, and a host of other technologies. So I think I'll stop sharing there, and let's see if we've got any questions coming up from people at this point. So first question. Is Land Rover going after the military contracts with the new Defender? Any comment on that, John or Sean?
They're definitely looking at the white, what we call as white vehicle contracts, which means they're the vehicles that are not necessarily frontline vehicles. Whether there's something in the pipeline for frontline, good question. We've never heard anything about it, but that doesn't mean that they're not looking at it, but I can't guarantee.
Yeah, given that the current Mercedes G-Wagon contract is still active, and will probably need to be supported up until this 2020, so it'll need to be supported at least till 2040. It's generally a 20-year sort of lifespan. So yeah, I can't see anything happening in the immediate future for Land Rover working for military, other than possibly the white fleet.
All right, good stuff. Now the next question is from Thomas Brownlee. Does terrain response 2 work on the 90 if it's a 90 with coils? We should probably explain what terrain response 2 is before we answer that particular question. So Sean, can you just run us through what terrain response 2 actually is, please?
All right, well, to explain terrain response 2, we need to talk about terrain response. So terrain response is where the vehicle pre-programs, or you're selecting the programming of the vehicle for the type of terrain that's driving on. So you're basically telling it whether you're driving in certain modes like your grass, gravel, snow, your mud ruts, sand, and even rock crawl. So if we look at grass, gravel, snow, basically what we're looking at, soft ground, and you're telling the vehicle it is going through slippery and soft ground. If we talk about rock crawl, the vehicle knows that it's actually going to be undulating over very, very rough terrain and possibly lifting wheels. So we're preempting and telling the car what it's actually going to expect. We can do that manually with terrain response by selecting them on the dial, of course. With terrain response 2, what we're doing there is we're putting it into what we call auto mode. And the car will actually configure itself to the type of terrain that it's actually driving on. And it generally starts off in the hardest setting. And when I say the hardest setting is the terrain setting, which is generally rock crawl. Then it'll go through to mud ruts. Then it goes grass, gravel, snow. Then it goes through to sand as a rough estimation. So the car can actually figure out, depending on the type of traction that it's getting, the inputs from the driver, it pre-selects what it's actually driving on. So terrain response incorporates a lot of different systems, the electronic air suspension. It even changes your shift pattern, the sensitivity of your throttle, and it even controls the differentials, whether that's the center and the rear, on how much they need to be locked and unlocked. But it also adjusts the traction control system. So it's individually adjusting all the brakes as necessary to send the torque where it's needed. Because it uses all those systems, the terrain response is limited in relation to coil suspension because it hasn't got that suspension system to operate, which means it doesn't actually have the capability of altering its suspension or measuring its suspension travel. So I would have to say terrain response 2 probably is not part of the coil sprung 90.
Yeah, it wasn't on the when it had a Discovery 3 with coil springs. It wasn't part of that, so maybe it wouldn't be here either. Yeah.
And I'll be quite honest with you, Robert, and to everyone else watching, I haven't seen a coil sprung Defender, so I doubt very much they're going to have a terrain response system on it in relation to what we've expected. They may have some sort of settings in it, but I haven't seen one. John, have you got any more information on that?
No, at this stage, no. And I am of the same opinion as you, Sean. I doubt that it will come out with terrain response 2 because it doesn't have the ability to change as many configurations within the vehicle as possible.
Yeah, so a comment on terrain response. So that's what's termed an adaptive terrain system. And as Sean said, it allows the vehicle to adapt itself to different terrains. And Land Rover were first out with that in 2005. And the concept's since been copied by pretty much every other 4x4 manufacturer. Jeep have got select terrain, Mitsubishi have got, Nissan have got all mode, etc. But Land Rover's really is very effective, and it makes a significant difference to the vehicle's capability if you select the correct setting there. So we could talk a fair bit about how to drive with that as well. But we might move on to the next question, which is from Michael Wright. How will the new Defender affect the current Disco? And it's an interesting question there. So I think for quite a lot of Discovery 3 and 4 owners, we're probably looking at the Discovery, well, not really called Discovery 5, but we'll call it Discovery 5 anyway, and wondering if it was the car for them. And now I think a lot of them might be wanting to jump across to the new Defender. So yeah, I think that they're going to run side by side. It'll be interesting to see how many people on the call, on this Zoom call, would be looking at buying a new Defender if they're current Discovery owners.
Yeah, look, for sure. Land Rover's actually putting their vehicles into what they call 3 families. They're calling the Range Rover series, so everything from your Range Rover, Vogue, autobiography, right through to Evoque. They're calling them their luxury family. So capability with refinement is how they're referring to it. Then they've got their leisure sector, and that is Discovery. So Discovery and Discovery Sport, and they're calling that with capability and versatility. Then the third family, which is our newest family, it's always been there, but they're just starting to promote it now. It's dual purpose. So we're talking about capability with durability. So they're actually classing the vehicles into 3 different families. Now we know they share a lot of components and systems and things like that. If you compare Defender to Discovery, Discovery has a lot more luxurious features to it. It's also a bigger vehicle. So it's got the full 7-seat capacity, whereas the Defender is only 5+2. So if you're really looking for that little bit extra room, especially for families, and you still want your off-road capability, and the Discovery is exceptional off-road, that's the car for you. Whereas if you want something that's a little bit simpler, and the interiors are vastly different, not that the Defender is a slouch, it still has its leather, it still has its luxury in there, but it's not as abundant as Discovery, if I can say it like that. Can it take sales from Discovery? That's another question I get asked a lot. That depends on the person and what they're looking for. And I believe with the Defender coming in at a cheaper vehicle, if I can say that, or I should say a lower price, I think it will definitely swing a few people across. But again, it depends on what you're looking for, because there is a big difference in the capacity or the room that it has available.
Yeah, and I've just put a graphic up on the screen there, and it's interesting to compare the load space, because for me, when I buy a new four-wheel drive, how much you can put in the back is a big deal to me. And you can see there that the older new Defenders are about the same sort of length, but the old one's got a much greater load space in the rear. But we all know how cramped that second row is in the old Defender, and even the first row there, and that's kind of the difference there. And you can also see the two Discoveries. Again, the older models got a much squarer, sort of taller profile to it, so it's a different load space area there. So I guess it's just evolution of designs there as well.
What's interesting about your graphic there too is if you look at all four vehicles, you can see which vehicle has the longest wheelbase.
Yeah,
is the new Defender.
Yep, it is. But if you look at that overhang on the new Defender, I mean, for a long wheelbase vehicle, there's virtually no overhang on the new Defender. Now, it looks to me like the back of the 110 and the 90, in fact, I've actually got a slide on that, I'll just move that forwards to that, are in fact identical. There it is. Whereas in the previous model, there was much more overhang on the 110 than there was on the 90, but in this case, it looks absolutely identical to me.
And basically they are, yes.
Yeah. Now, there has been, a question here is, I think one on Facebook there, is there going to be a pickup or a ute version? I believe that was originally planned, but I'm also pretty sure now that's been ruled out. Is there any word on that? Or is it not confirmed?
I haven't heard anything on that.
Yeah, so I look, personally, my speculation here, I wouldn't be putting any money on there being a ute version of it. But there are strong rumours that and only rumours at this point, that there will be a 130, and the rumours say that the 130 will have the same wheelbase as the 110, but a greater overhang, which kind of makes sense, because then you'd get a fair bit of extra load space. And to me, that would kind of, if that comes out, that might be the one to go, because I'd love a bit of extra load space, and I could give up a bit of departure angle. That's just me personally. Why are rated rear recovery points only fitted to Defender X? Is that even true?
Well, are they referring to the new eyelets, or are they thinking that none of the recovery points on any of our other Land Rover products are rated? Because if that's what they're thinking, they're incorrect. They're actually all rated on all our vehicles. But the new Defender does actually have the capability of putting specific eyelets through the rear bumper bar, which are rated.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the points we should mention here is that the Land Rover products historically have had good recovery points, which are rated to round about the GCM of the vehicle, and that's going to continue with Defender, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, good. Now, can you just talk to us about what the front one is like, where it's positioned, how to get to it, and also the rear one?
Okay, so the front recovery point is actually mounted low down underneath the bumper, but it's easily accessible. In respect to saying that, if you've got the standard model, there is a slight trim that you need to remove, very similar to what we did with Discovery. If you want to, you can actually remove that panel permanently, like a lot of people do. You can even get a aluminium bash plate that actually fits in the front of it. It's actually 5mm thick. It's not a sales pitch, but it's just there. And it actually keeps that eyelet exposed. So it's mounted down underneath the bumper bar where they have been traditionally with Land Rovers. In the rear, the recovery points are actually mounted in the left and right of the center of the rear bumper. There's two small little plastic clips. You just give them a push and they pop out. With the standard vehicle, where they don't have the eyelet sticking out, they've actually got the left-handed eyelet that screws in like a lot of cars these days. But in a straight line pull, it's still rated at 6.5 tonne, and it's actually quite big and heavy. So when you see one, you'll go, wow, it's not hard to see that. With the Defender X, they come standard with the 2 mounting eyelets in the back. And I've since discovered you can actually, if you really want to, I'm speaking out of school here, you could actually option them onto your vehicle, but they'd be after the fact that the vehicle's turned up. They're not a factory option for the others.
Okay, good stuff. So next question then, talking about Land Rover reliability. Oh, that's this old one again there. So let's talk about Land Rover reliability. So because it always comes up. So my view on this is that, and I've owned Land Rovers myself, they absolutely are reliable. They just need proper care, attention and maintenance like any vehicle, and the modern ones are complex and they need appropriate care and maintenance. But you know, I off-roaded my Defender and Discovery for a long time, and yeah, had no concerns about reliability. So anything else anybody wants to add on that one?
I think you hit the nail on the head. Providing you're doing the regular maintenance that you're supposed to be, I think any vehicle, if you're especially neglecting the maintenance, can become unreliable.
Yeah. Okay, now another question from John Brook. In the car I looked at yesterday, I noticed the glass instrument panel was unlit with the ignition switched off. If this panel has a total electrical failure, are you literally left in the dark, or is there some form of alternate instrumentation option available? I love these questions.
Well, I suppose if you had a total electrical failure, yes, you would lose all the instruments. If you have a total electrical failure in a 1975 Land Cruiser, don't all the instruments stop as well?
That might happen, but the chance of the TFT failing is pretty small because it's just typically not one. I mean, when was the last time your phone screen just completely failed there as well? So yeah, look, I guess potentially that could happen, but I don't think it's pretty high up on the worry list, to be honest.
10 years since Range Rover worked with TFT screens, I've seen one screen that an owner actually claimed that it went blank, and that wasn't the case.
So what size tyres can you fit to 18-inch wheels? Well, obviously the answer to that is 18-inch tyres, but I think you mean what's the greatest diameter? And I have seen that people are running 33-inch tyres comfortably in the US. Obviously that wouldn't be recommended by or warranted by Land Rover Australia, I'm guessing. I don't know if anyone's got bigger than 33s, but to be honest, I'd question why you really need to go above 32 inches, because you're getting a hell of a lot of ground clearance with that independent suspension, and 32 inches is a pretty decent diameter. So, you know, if you go to 33s, I guess that's going to be fine. So I wouldn't be too worried about the size of things there. Any comment from you guys on tyre diameters?
Well, one of the major things, if I may, sorry, Sean, one of the things we fit larger diameter tyres onto vehicles for is to give differentials on live axles greater clearance. Being an independent suspended vehicle, the differentials are high and centered and tucked well out of the way, so the need for greater ground clearance is no longer there. The whole idea of rubbing a differential through the center of a track somewhere just doesn't exist. Yeah,
well, exactly. And let's also talk about air suspension and flex now as well, because whilst these vehicles do have independent air suspension, it's not quite the same as what you may think. And here's an example of how it works. So this is an old photograph I took back in about 2006. On the left there, you can see my old Defender, which obviously has live axles and no sway bars. And then there's 2 Discoveries, both with independent suspension. The middle one has air suspension, and the one on the right, the blue one, has coil suspension. You can see there's a significant difference between the 2 there. Now, the reason is that the air suspension vehicle has something called a crosslink. So that actually forces the opposing wheel down to mimic the effect of the live axle. And I believe that's the case in new Defender. Right, Sean?
Correct. That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not as much flex as the live axle, but there's still quite a bit of flex there. Now, something else you may notice about this photograph is that the more flex a vehicle has, the lower the chassis gets to the ground, and therefore the less clearance you've got. If you look at that blue car, it's well and truly up above the ground. It's got the wheel high in the air, which is not great for stability, but it does have the chassis a long way off the ground. So now we've got super effective traction control, and we've got that cross-link gear suspension. I think the new Defender is going to be pretty amazing off-road. All right, we will now jump into another question then. So will aftermarket accessories such as bull bars be able to be fitted to the new Defender? Now, the answer on that is that we've got to talk to the aftermarket people for that. I have had a bit of a whisper with some of them, and none of them are rushing out to develop new accessories for the Defender in the way that they would for, let's say, new Hilux or something like that. So I think watch this space. If there's demand, then you will find that the accessories will be developed. Okay. Another question. I hear you can't order a new Defender in diesel until late 2021. Is that true? Any comment on that?
I'm not sure about the late 2021, but there is definitely an issue with ordering a diesel at the moment, and it's basically due to part supplies. Again, this is a COVID thing, and this is what's happening around the world. The manufacturers are supplying parts, just can't keep up with the demand with their restrictions and all that sort of stuff, very similar to what we're facing here in Australia, and they just can't get their parts. So just at the moment, they're having trouble ordering diesels, yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, good. So done that one. And when do 90 sales start? Any idea on that? Can anyone order a 90?
In Australia, I don't think you can order a 90 as in like order a 110. But they were due for release later this year. I might get John to jump in a moment. However, after saying that, with all the delays due to COVID, that is just watch this space at this time, because I know that there's a lot of countries that have not been able to get the vehicles that they were looking for, and not just Land Rover either. So there's been a hold up all over the place.
All right, good stuff. Okay, and another question, is the six-seat option coming to Australia?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I've definitely seen that. So that would allow, and that would be for the 90 as well. So with the 90, you'd actually be able to have 6 people in the vehicle, and in the but in the 110, could you have 3 in the front, 3 in the back, and 2 in the rear to make 8? No,
you can only have 5, 6, or the 5+2. So you can't have, if you go for the 5+2, as in the third row seats, you cannot have the jump seat in the front row.
Okay, all right. Now let's have a quick chat about engines. A question from Tom C. Is the D350 engine coming? What are the engine options we've got now, and what about the hybrid?
So in Australia, despite the poor supply of diesel engines at the moment, but we have available the D200, the D250 and the P400. So they're the definite options at the moment. The new 6-cylinder diesel is now available in Range Rover Sport and Range Rover. I think a natural progression into Defender, but at the same time, we don't know just yet, but who knows. The plug-in hybrid is due for release worldwide in 21 at some stage. Again, I'm not sure of the date of that, but they are still doing trials with the vehicle, but I think they're pretty much nailed down for release for next year.
Okay, good stuff. All right, now we're going to launch into towing now, so let's have a bit of a chat about that. So here's what we know about towing. The vehicle will be able to tow 3.5 tons. The gross combination mass will be 6,750, which is the sum of the GVM plus 3,500 kilogram max tow, and the towable mass will be 350 kilograms. And I haven't put on there, but I'm pretty sure it will also have trailer stability control. And obviously with that really short overhang and air suspension and all-wheel drive system, I think it will be a formidable tow vehicle. So that's actually a really important point. when you're towing with the ute, you've got this massive overhang at the back. It's about 1.5 meters between the center of the rear wheels and the tow ball, and that's really bad for towing. That puts a lot of stress on the chassis, and it allows the trailer to boss things around. With the 110, it's got a very, very short rear overhang and a relatively long wheelbase, so it's going to be super stable. The air suspension will keep the vehicle level. So I think that the new Defender will be shaping up to be one hell of a tow vehicle. What do you guys think?
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be probably the best tow vehicle we see in Australia, to be quite honest. The trailer stability control is actually a standard feature right throughout the range. So that is there whether or not you wanted to go for, say, advanced tow assist, where it's got the system where it'll actually steer the vehicle for you. So you operate the control knob. I don't know if anyone's seen that or not, but have a look at it. It's amazing stuff. For anyone who's never towed it or backed a trailer before, it's just an amazing system, and the vehicle does the steering for you as you control it. Towing wise, those figures are exceptional, especially for the size the vehicle is, and I think it's going to be a real winner for towing in Australia.
Yeah, it kind of ticks most of the boxes to me. I mean, it will be 8-speed automatic, a good all-wheel drive system. I much prefer to tow with all-wheel drive, short wheelbase, proper all-wheel drive, and 350 kilogram tow ball mass, and a decent payload as well. So the numbers pretty well stack up to me. Now, another question here from Brock: is the off-road towing capacity 1,000 kilograms?
I believe it is. Actually, I'm not 100% sure, to be quite honest. I haven't actually seen any specs for off-road only. I'll have to get back to you on that one, Robert. John, have you got an answer for that?
No, I mean, I know we stipulated that for previous Defender, 1,000 kilos off road, and I've never been able to clarify what the determination of off road was. I was led to believe that it's basically anywhere the vehicle could tow a trailer. It had a 1,000 kilo limit, but yeah, for new Defender, yet to be defined as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Look, I mean, I would say that for me, if you're into terrain where you'd have to use low range normally, then about 1/3 of the maximum towing capacity is a good rule of thumb. I mean, it depends a lot really, but that's kind of a good rule of thumb. And 1,000 is a bit under 1/3, so I reckon that's probably a pretty good way to go there as well. All right, so and I'm not aware of any manufacturer which really gives a specific off-road towing capability, because off-road is such a broad brush term really. But my personal recommendation would be no more than about 1/3 of your maximum tow if you're going to go into low-range territory, and John's nodding there, so that's good. All right, let's have a quick talk about some of the options then. So there is actually, so the aftermarket may not be rushing out with lots of bull bars, but Land Rover does have a winch option. So can you talk to us about this winch option, please?
Yeah, for sure. This is a new Xenon worn winch, and it's specifically designed to mount in behind the bumper bar of the actual vehicle itself. You can still see the cable or the rope actually winding up on the drum, so there is vision there. The interesting thing about it is actually the first vehicle that I'm aware of that's actually got a winch and still has a pedestrian safety rating.
Oh, wow.
So it has the full wireless electric worn winch, like I just said, and it's 40-metre rope on it, I believe. I haven't got the specs right in front of me. But yeah, it's going to be an absolute winner.
Okay. Now, did you say it's a special winch? Does that mean that your standard winch won't fit? You can't just buy an off-the-shelf one and just fit it?
Well, I'm not sure on that one, Robert. I can't see why a normal winch would fit, but I don't have an answer for you for that. But they are using the worn Xenon, please forgive me, 10... Yeah, sorry, I apologise. It's the worn Xenon 10 winch. So that's readily available. You could go into any worn shop and buy that now if you wanted. So I'm assuming that's the winch that Land Rover is recommending for that vehicle.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's good to see that there's a winch option there anyway. So, okay, fantastic. All right. So move on to the next question then, which is, Wheel size, yes, let's talk about that. Bill Cleverly asks, is it correct that 18-inch wheels are only on entry-level cars? Good, strong off-road tyres for 19s are still a major issue. What does this mean for remote work? So, okay, I'll give a bit of a preface that, and Sean, you can come in with some more stuff then. So, my view is that you want the smallest wheel diameter possible. And, you know, if you can go for 17s or 18s, generally you should do that for off-roading. With the Defender, though, it's less of a problem because whilst it might be 18 or 19-inch, and, you know, I personally prefer 17s, it's actually a 65 profile, even on the 19-inch tyre. So you've got a lot more sidewall on the 19-inch rim on a Defender than you do a 19-inch rim on a Discovery. And, you know, since I first started testing these low-profile tyres, you know, 15 years ago, they've come a long way, and you can absolutely now get strong off-road tyres in 19 and 20-inch. I don't know what the tyre options are for the, I think it's 255, 65, 19 in the Defender, but you'd assume that there would be some coming out. So, yeah, over to you, Sean.
I agree with you in everything. Depending on what you want to do with your vehicle, we've even found, you know, 20-inch tyres in sand quite acceptable, of course. That's still your 29 or 30-inch tyres. Obviously, if you're doing the high country and things like that, the smaller rim size with the better sidewall is always better. But there is a lot more, and I'm just going to speak off the cuff here, there's a lot more brands actually putting out a lot more tyre variations, even for 20 inches these days. And if do some research, and you'll find that you'll see more off-road tyres for 20s than you do 19s.
Yeah, that's right. And there's a company called Tough Ant, and I've looked up a bit, and they do offer aftermarket wheels. So if you do want a set of 18s or 19s, even 17s, I think they should be able to fix you up with them. Green Oval are no longer trading and to be avoided. There's a formal warning out for those guys. But yeah, have a look for Tough Ant if you want aftermarket wheels there. Okay, so if the new Defender ticks so many of your boxes, will you be ordering one? I presume that's aimed at me. The answer is no, because I'm living the ute life at the moment. I really love my ute and my service body, and the Defender doesn't give that to me. So probably not is my view there. I'd like to talk a little bit about terrain response 2 and the configurable terrain response. So we talked before about what terrain response is. It's an adaptive system which sets up all the vehicle's electronics so that the cars optimized for a given terrain, but there's also configurable terrain response. So talk to us about that, Sean. What is configurable terrain response, which is new to new Defender?
So with terrain response, one of the criticisms for the previous vehicles was that you would select your terrain response and then the computer would do all the decision making for you in relation to your gear shift patterns and also your throttle response, even the locking of the differentials and things like that. With configurable terrain response, Land Rover has actually taken 4 of the main settings and actually given the driver the capability of adjusting them to what they want themselves. So with the little icon that you've got up there, we can see 2 of those systems. One of them is the differentials. So you can actually select auto, where we're leaving the computer to decide whether to partially lock or fully lock the differentials. We can then fully lock the center differential. And of course, if the vehicle's fitted with the optional rear diff, we can actually lock both the center and the rear differential. So what we can do with this in our 4 different settings, which is the differentials, the traction control sensitivity, the steering sensitivity, and our powertrain, I'll get to powertrain in a moment, we can actually pre-select what we think would be the bespoke position for what we want in all our settings. So you can customize it with these variations for the particular track or whatever you'd like to do. And the good part about it too is you can actually save different settings for particular areas or tracks that you do. With the powertrain setting, which is available, it actually controls the throttle response, so you can have it either relaxed or a little bit more responsive. There we go. You can even change the torque output. The computer's doing this to an extent, but you can pre-select how you want it to respond.
Okay, all right. So interesting way of working there. So my experience of driving, I think, a lot of these vehicles off-road is that the electronics, by and large, don't need much manual intervention. But there's a couple of times when I would have liked to take control myself. One is the gear shift, but you can do that anyway. You've got command shift there. And another one, I think, particularly is coming down hills. I'd like to be able to engage the rear locker, so that just helps a little bit coming down rutted hills. So I guess what I would have liked to have seen out of this is, rather than sort of have 3 or 4 presets, is just almost like the button saying engage, disengage, rear locker, another one for lock, unlock, center diff, or something like that. But whereas this is kind of 3 preset, or 4, is it 3 preset modes of 4 options, right?
Approximately, yeah, that's correct.
Okay. All right, yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see how useful in practice that is off-road. I'm not 100% convinced about this yet, but I think I just need to drive it for a while in different terrains and see if I sort of find myself wishing it was there and starting to use it.
Well, the way I like to look at it is, if you look at systems that are reactive and proactive. So for argument's sake, if we take a traditional diff lock, people will try and drive through a hole. It might start to spin, so they stop, engage diff lock, and keep driving. So that's a reactive, even though the driver had full control of that. We all know that if you've got a diff lock fitted to your car, you generally lock them in, even if you think you don't need them, because that's a proactive system to do, and it's preempting what you're expecting it to happen. With this configurable terrain response, it gets that one step further. It's giving you some flexibility with the electronic controlled systems to actually highlight what you think the car's going to need. So yes, we can leave the car up to it, and it is intelligent enough to actually work it all out, and they're very responsive, as you are aware, Robert. But this gives a little bit of the control back to the driver if they think, you know, this is the way we'd like it set up, and not just leave it to the car.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be interested to see if anyone's got any comments. Shout them out on the comment there as to what your views of configurable terrain response and how well you'd think you'd be able to use it. Okay, let's move for another couple of questions. Will the 18-inch compromotive wheels for the D4 fit on the new Defender? I think the answer to that is we don't know. You're just going to have to pull one off and try it, but possibly. So I guess there's no further answer than that, Sean.
I wouldn't know, Robert. I'm sorry, I have no idea.
I think you're just going to have to pull it off and try it, yeah. Thomas Brownlee is now so sold on the new Defender, he's offering to be a brand ambassador, and he's allowing Land Rover to send him a new Defender to add to his stable of 12. So there we go. That is. I mean, how could they turn that down? Land Rover PR will be on the phone Monday morning. I've got no doubt with a Defender on a truck sending to you, Thomas. Just send us your address, and a new Defender will come. Okay, so here we go. This is a good question. What are the benefits of varying the steering effort off-road? How does it vary in the preset program? So a bit of preamble to that. Most cars these days have EPAS, or electric power steering. The reason for that is twofold. First of all, it's more efficient, uses less fuel than the old hydraulic method. Secondly, there's a lot of advanced electronic stuff you can do, such as self-parking and driver fatigue monitoring, and a whole bunch of other things you can do once the car can start to assist with the steering. And a side benefit of that is you can have different steering modes. You can make it easy or hard to turn the steering wheel. And personally, I found them all pretty pointless because you see it in sports cars often. Here's a sport mode, here's a not. It makes no difference to the feel of the car or the handling. It's just purely steering effort. So I personally don't see a huge amount of point varying the steering effort off-road. But what's your view, Sean?
Well, I think that comes down to personal choice a little bit. I have driven the new vehicle, and its steering is absolutely exceptional, and the steering is very, very light. I wouldn't say it's ridiculously light. I'm just saying that it's just so nice to steer. I haven't had a chance to use the configurable terrain response in depth. It's something I'm really keen to explore extensively myself. But, you never know. You might find that some settings might require a bit more effort than others, and it just gives you that better feel. Until I get a chance to actually try it out in a few different situations, Robert, I'm sort of pretty excited about this actually, and I'm really keen to explore this.
Yeah, look, I've used variable steering in quite a few different vehicles on and off road, and found it. Look, it's nice to have it, but it wouldn't be high up there on my list of must-haves. All right, so let's talk a bit now about accessories. And so there's a whole bunch there. You can get, like, you know, all the usual stuff like burnished wheel arches or whatever else. I've just zoomed in on 4, which I think are going to be interesting to four-wheel drive people. One is there's a roof rack you can get for. I didn't put a photograph of up there. There's a raised air intake. Now that is a raised air intake, not a sealed snorkel. So if you get that, my advice is to seal it, because otherwise I don't think that would be a waterproof snorkel. Although the wading depth is 900 millimeters, which is pretty. In fact, I think that's the deepest of any stock four-wheel drive on the market. Probably the next best is Ranger, 800 mil. Then getting into the interesting stuff, a portable rinsing system. What on earth is a portable rinsing system, Sean?
Basically, it's like a container where you'd actually add water to it. It's about 6 litres of water, and then you pump it up with a little air pump. It compresses the air in there, and it gives you the option to be able to wash products, your dog, the mud off your boots, whatever you'd like to do. It's a fully portable system. It's not mounted to the vehicle. It's just something that people find handy. You could wash down your wetsuit with it, clean your boots, so to speak. Wash the dog maybe before you put him back in the car. It's just one of those lifestyle type of options.
Okay, good stuff. And the next interesting one is the onboard air compressor. Now, because the vehicle has air suspension, it already has an air compressor. So this is an air compressor you can actually use. So can we use it for, is that standard? What can we use it for? Could we put power tools onto it? Is it just for tyres or what? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so the air compressor, you can get it in a couple of ways. One, it comes as one of the option accessory packs, and it's mounted in the left-hand rear corner of the load space. It's a dealer fit option, which means anyone can then order that after they've bought the vehicle independently. And the big advantage with it, it's a compressor that is separate from the air suspension. We don't recommend you use the air suspension as an air supply for tyres. So this is independent from that, and it's designed so you can quickly inflate and reflate your tyres, obviously one at a time. It comes standard with a flexible hose. It reaches right around the vehicle, and you can actually pre-select the pressures electronically with a control inside, and even adjust it to what you're used to, whether you want PSI or KPA or bar or whatsoever. So it's a really good system to have in the back of the vehicle because it's just nice and convenient. It's always there.
Yeah, okay. And would it be powerful enough to run power tools? What do you think, or not? No?
I don't know, actually. I don't think it's air supply. It hasn't got a big air tank or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I haven't actually tried. I think it's air supply in volume will be limited for air tools, but definitely pumping up tyres, not an issue.
Okay. All right, good. So let's move on then to the side pod, which is top right-hand corner there. So this is a pod, an extra storage pod, which goes on the side of the vehicle there. And that just looks like it literally clips on, and it looks like it's got a separate key to the rest of things. And presumably just open it up, and I don't know. I mean, I guess you could put snatch straps or similar in there. And yeah, talk to us about that. I mean, is there some form of mesh in there? Is there a limit? To my mind, I'm slightly worried that might get ripped off in the bush. Actually, it protrudes a little bit.
It's equivalent to like a 20-litre capacity in its volume.
Okay.
And when you open it up, and you're right, it has got a separate key, so it's fully lockable. When you open it up, it lifts up. The lid lifts up about 90 degrees. Being so high, it's actually really accessible. It's roughly a head height for you. It's got a small lip on the bottom of it. And yeah, you can put anything in there. You could put your dirty, muddy snatch straps somewhere to put them without actually having to put them in the vehicle. If you wanted to carry extra supplies or bits and pieces, things like that in there. It is mounted on the outside of the vehicle on the right-hand side. It is obvious in the mirror, I will say that.
Uh,
but you can actually use it. It's not as big as you think in relation to, you know, vision and things like that. But it is bolted to the vehicle, so you do have to have the roof rails already fitted to the roof for it to mount at the top as well.
Okay. All right. So does it get in the way of the wing mirrors? That's actually a good point.
It does take away some of the visibility, yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I wonder how much that's going to be. All right. Okay. So another interesting accessory there is what looks to be a cargo barrier. I don't think they call it a cargo barrier, but it's some form of cargo divider there, which is good. So if that's a factory fit option, also looks like in the middle there, it's actually got something you can take down, so you can sort of fit longer items in the rear without needing to take the entire cargo barrier, cargo guard out as well.
Yeah, they actually have two versions of that. That is the full length, let's call it a cargo barrier. And then they have a half one, which is just the top half, if that's what you want to do. They are rated, but they're a UK rating. They haven't been given an Australian rating to what we normally see. So I can't give you a comment on what the rating would be.
Okay, if it's rated for the UK, then that would be safe enough. It may not actually pass. Well, may not. Yeah, I think that's good. So it's great to see that's an option there as well. Okay, let's go to a few more questions then. So Chris Wilson is saying, is there an option for a front locker, or will we rely on traction control? Well, there won't be a front locker, but to be honest, the traction control on this is so damn good. And you can, if you go to my YouTube channel and look up Hill of Truth videos, you'll see that the Discovery 5 does a pretty amazing job. And as soon as these restrictions are out, I'm going to be back at the Hill of Truth with a Land Cruiser 200 series, a Discovery 5, a Y62 Patrol, and hopefully a new Defender. And yeah, I'm going to have to find a rubbish car to put up against. I might take my old Ranger and then just use that as a base mark there. So yeah, there's going to be no worry about needing traction control there. Okay, next question is, does the steering lighten at low speeds and tighten and get stiffer at speed?
Is the electronic assisted steering speed sensitive? Yes, definitely.
Yeah, it is sensitive.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and that's true of pretty much all electric power steering systems, not just Defender. Yeah. Alberto asks, any experience on cabin noise? I haven't driven it, you have, so talk to us about cabin noise.
Very, very quiet. I've been saying to a few people, it's actually unfair to compare it to the previous Defender, because the noise and the technology and everything that goes with it, just everything about it, it's a completely different vehicle. The noise inside is very, very quiet. It's equivalent to driving Discovery. Is
there a TPMS or tyre pressure monitoring system option? Now, they would have that in the USA where it's mandatory. I didn't see it in the spec list for Australia, though.
The tyre pressure monitoring system is actually standard. Okay. So it comes standard with a tyre pressure monitoring system. It doesn't have a central inflation system. That's not capable on the vehicle, as in an option or anything, but tyre pressure monitoring is actually standard.
So you've actually driven the vehicle, Sean, and you have as well, John. Give us your impressions of it, please, relative to, I guess, a Discovery 3.4, which is a known quantity for a lot of people.
The car handles exceptionally well. It would definitely, if pushed, would out-handle a 3 and a 4, which is a big say. The ride is firm, but it's not rough. It's actually really got a nice presence on the road. It does have active dynamic systems on the vehicle, so it's actually tuning the suspension for best performance with cornering. The way I like to describe it is, if you've ever driven the Range Rover Sport, it's not uncomfortable, but it's got a very firm ride because it's a sport vehicle. If you drive Discovery, it definitely doesn't body roll, but it's a lot smoother in its ride, and it's not as dynamic as Range Rover Sport. The new Defender is actually about halfway between the two. Pushing it through corners, it actually feels very, very stable and flat.
Okay. John, do you want to add anything with an off-road perspective, particularly on that?
Yeah, off-road, the vehicle has the articulation and suspension modulation to be able to conform to a number of different scenarios. I had the great joy of driving it at Eastnor in January this year. So, God, that seems so long ago now. But it as Sean said, it has the on-road performance that sits between Discovery and current Range Rover. So therefore, it vastly outperforms Discovery 3 and Discovery 4, which were both chassis-dependent vehicles. The ability for this thing to be supple in an off-road scenario is just unbelievable. It really is.
Okay. All right. So you're saying it's a step above the Discovery 3, 4 then in on-road and off-road?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, definitely. Yes.
Move on to the suspension then. So Defenders will have air suspension, and that means there's different heights. So you've got your normal ride height, then you've got an off-road 1 mode, which raises it 75 millimeters above the normal height, and that is the vehicle can drive up to 50 kilometers an hour in that mode. Now, if you exceed 50 kilometers an hour, back in the days of Discovery 3 and 4, that would drop you right down to normal mode, but in this case it drops you down to an off-road 2 mode, which is 40 millimeters above the normal height, and that's valid up to 80. Once you get above 80, then it will drop down to normal height. Now, there is an extended mode which the vehicle can go into of plus 145 millimeters, but you can't manually select that. And you can also drop it down manually by 50 millimeters. And I used to use that in my Discovery 3 to sneak underneath trees. And then as soon as I was underneath the tree, I'd raise it up again. And then the patrols and cruisers behind me were going, oh yeah, he made it through. Clearly I'll be able to as well. So that was quite funny, yeah. So Sean, can you talk to us about the air suspension options, please, and particularly how we get into this extended mode and how that works?
Okay. The air suspension is very, very similar. Well, the whole suspension system is actually very, very similar to Discovery, though it does have, even though the control arms and things like that look the same, they do actually have bigger and stronger control arms for the vehicle. Its bushes and ball joints are larger. They're approximately 5 millimeters bigger. Might not sound a lot, but makes a big difference in the size of a bush and a ball joint. So the system's designed to be a lot heavier for the off-road use. So with the all the suspension that you mentioned there, as in the off-road one, that's something you can select by just selecting off-road. So when you're in the vehicle, you've really only got 3 choices with the buttons. So you've got your access mode, so that makes it easy to get in and out. Standard ride height, as you drive away, it lifts up for you, and you can even get it to drop down to access height when you pull up and stop if you want to go there. With the off-road extended mode, basically if you run out of ground clearance, the car will actually pick up that it's bellied out, or there is something stopping it from lowering, or picking up that it's hitting the ground. So what it'll do is the car will automatically ask you, do you want to go into extended mode, and actually start lifting the vehicle up. And it does that for you. You can't pre-select it. But once it's lifted up approximately 70 millimeters, it will then say, would you like to go higher? And then you can manually select that higher setting and go even higher again. And that'll give you your 145 millimeter clearance.
Okay, fantastic. And I'll just put up that screen again just to show the difference. And this is the Discovery 3, but same concept there, the cross-linked air suspension versus a live access. So a fair bit of stuff there. Well, this is the same sort of system that's in Discovery 5, and I'm really happy that there's the option to have some greater air suspension raised height above 50 k's an hour, because it used to drive me nuts in the Discovery 3 when I couldn't exceed 50 k's an hour and the vehicle just lower itself back down again. All right, so we'll take the last few questions because it's been coming up to an hour now, and then we'll start to wind this up. So will the 6-cylinder diesel have 18-inch wheels? Any idea on that? It was probably just a question for the spec sheet, isn't it, really?
Pretty much.
Yeah. I think we just referred to the Land Rover website for that one. Same deal for one about configurations for the 9T. We don't know about that one. would the side pod pass ADRs? Well, you've got to say that it would, otherwise it wouldn't be offered. Will the 200 be livable as is, or will additional specification be required? Well, depends on your definition of livable, I guess, but if anyone's coming out of a Defender, as we knew it before, the Pumas, yeah, this is going to be, I guess, total luxury compared. So, yeah, I'm not really quite sure how to answer that. Yeah. Can you adjust the suspension feel? I think the answer to that is no, but adaptive dynamics. Just talk to us a bit more about adaptive dynamics, please, Sean.
So the adaptive dynamics actually controls the shocker rates, as to want to put it simply. And it can instantaneously feel whether or not the car's cornering or cornering hard, and it actually stiffens the suspension on corners. But when you're driving in a straight line, if you start to, hit bumps and things like that, it then actually backs the shocker off, so it actually gives you a smoother ride. After saying that, and that's a simple way of putting it, it doesn't take away any of the rebound or the control of the suspension either. Because when you get them on corrugations and push them quite hard on corrugations, the car is very, very stable, very responsive.
Yeah.
The biggest concern, I've mentioned to a few people, if you're on corrugations with this car and you're towing, don't forget about the trailer, because you won't notice the corrugations in the Defender.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. All right, so fuel tank capacity, that's 85 to 90 litres and the 110, depending on the engine model there. Testing in Australian conditions, yes, I believe the car was extensively tested in Australia, wasn't it? I'm pretty sure pictures of it being tested.
I'm not sure if it has been tested in Australia, but when you consider, I thought that we had some pretty hot conditions and that sort of stuff out here. Having toured in Dubai and having been to the test facility in Dubai, they're testing in ambient temperatures of 55 degrees, so far in excess of what we would test in Australia here. Also down to minus 35 degrees in Arjeplog in Sweden. The vehicle's been tested in a considerable amount of different areas around the world. I think it's done something like 2 million kilometres of testing. It's just phenomenal. It's been tested harder and faster and more rigidly than any other vehicle we've done before.
Let's just talk about the hybrid options for a moment, because that's going to be a big deal coming up for pretty much every car manufacturer. Whether you like it or not, electrification is on the way, and Land Rover is going to be no exception. Now, I have driven the Range Rover Sport plug-in hybrid electric vehicle off-road, and there's videos of me actually driving off-road electric mode, towing a trailer, and it does pretty amazingly well. There's also one of it on the Hill of Truth on electric mode. So the Land Rover Defender will also have PHEV as well, plug-in hybrid electric vehicle. So that's where you actually can plug the vehicle in, charge its battery off mains or whatever else, and with the Range Rover Sport, you can drive up to 50 kilometres or so, purely on electric mode. Probably going to be about the same for Defender, I don't know. This diagram shows you a bit about how the electrics work there as well. This is actually a mild hybrid, where it's just energy harvesting off as the vehicle slows down, and it sort of adds a bit of electrical power to the main internal combustion engine there, but there will be a plug-in hybrid electric variant as well. So anything you can tell us about that sort of technology, Sean?
Well, the particular vehicle we've got now with the mild hybrid technology, you can see on the slide there, it uses 48 volt mild system, and you can see that it stores up to 200 watts of energy. But the big thing with this is that the electrical system enhances the engine capability as well. So one of the things I'd like to point out there, they've got mentioned listed as what they call an e-supercharger. Now the e-supercharger, for the want of a better term, it's like an electric turbo, and it not only harnesses the exhaust fumes coming past and regenerating power back into the batteries, but when you put your foot down, instead of that normal turbo lag that you would feel from a vehicle between foot off and foot on again, this instantaneously spins up to massive speeds and replaces that lost boost in split seconds. And it's really, there is zero turbo lag in this vehicle. The advantage of being able to do that is you can then put a bigger turbo on that actually gives you better boost without having to lose the responsiveness. And that's a big thing with the vehicle. They're interesting to drive though. When you drive one and you're pulling up to a set of traffic lights and you know you're going to stop, we've all experienced stop-start technology in all these vehicles where the engine will switch off when you pull up and stop. These new systems, the vehicle actually stops at about 3 kilometers an hour. So it actually switches the engine off just before you stop.
Yeah, and I think that's a reason people don't like it. They don't like putting their foot down and then the internal combustion engine starting, but with this it's because it stops a little bit before. I know that when I've driven things like Priuses, it feels a lot better coming to a halt in electric, pulling away in electric, than sort of using the internal combustion engine to pull away there as well. But a couple of other points on this: when I was driving that Range Rover Sport off-road in electric mode, I could actually hear each individual tyre working on the ground, and that was a new dimension of off-road driving for me, which I hadn't experienced before, and it was pretty amazing. And I think that when we get really good electric engines, we're going to see what happens with sports cars, and that the electric engine is going to do all the low speed work, and the internal combustion engine can better be optimized for the higher speed, higher rev range work. So it's kind of acting in concert there. But look, we're getting into speculation now about what the future could be, but it's all pretty exciting, this sort of technology.
The good thing about the plug-in hybrid technology too is if you're doing a commute with up to 50 kilometres range, that you could drive a whole week to and from work and actually not use a drop of fuel.
Yep.
Now, Land Rover just don't turn the fuel system off. They actually have it circulating fuel, keeping it moving around, and they even pressurise the fuel tank. So if anyone's ever experienced one of these vehicles, it actually has a special button that you press to depressurize a tank. It's only a couple of PSI, but it actually stops moisture getting into the fuel tank and actually making the fuel go bad. So you can literally drive this car for months and months on end and not end up with the stale fuel issues like we used to experience years ago when driving, LPG powered cars.
Oh, that's really cool. I had no idea that. All right, so I've been going for now. I think that's it. So Sean, John and everyone else, I just have some closing words for you. 2 people who would be considering new Defender. They're all off-roaders. They're all off-roaders or towing people. What would you say to people who've got a Discovery 3 or 4 and are thinking about new Defender, pros and cons?
I think for someone who's driving a Discovery 3 or 4, I think stepping into a Defender, even though it's new and the whole car is new and the technology is new, it's going to feel very familiar to them. There's a lot of familiarity with the actual look because it's a nice square looking car, but it's definitely going to give you the more modern vehicle that you're looking for, and it's going to give you a lot more capability as well.
Okay, that's good. John, what would your views be?
I feel, I've owned Discovery 3, I've owned Discovery 4, driven Defender. I believe that it is, in every facet, it is a far superior vehicle. All the things that you wish you had when you were driving your 3 or your 4, they are now in Defender. And the vehicle is just so capable. I'm definitely putting an order in. I know Sean is already ordered his. It's just one of those things. I'll be trading in one of my Rangers for a Defender for sure. Absolutely.
That'd be great. Okay, well, thanks everybody. Thank you very much, John, Paul, and especially Sean for coming on and talking to us. Thanks everybody for watching this. This will be up on my YouTube channel, so if you want to re-watch it, then please do and share. And look out for future webinars. Going to be running one on fridges, and if you've got any suggestions for people who'd like to see on, do let me know. Other than that, thank you very much for watching, and have a happy isolation if you're isolating, or otherwise if you're out and about. I'm extremely jealous, and enjoy that whilst you can. Thanks everybody. See you again. Bye.